Good evening and welcome to the last Sunday night talk of this module as we wrap up the sport economics course for the spring of 2015. And in my case, I really don't know where the time went. It was a really busy spring time on campus. It was a busy time for me, both in academics and in athletics. Unfortunately, my team just lost in the Central Atlantic Collegiate Conference semifinals yesterday, and although it was a great showing to get there and to play in the conference championships, and we're sitting back now and waiting to see if we get a postseason tournament invitation, most likely to the ECAC championships, which is going to be held for the inaugural time. So I've been busy with my sporting life as well as my teaching life. And as we go into the end of the course, I would like to thank everybody for the work you've done, the time you put on the discussions, the time you put into your assignments. It's a little different, I realize, for a lot of people to have a course that is based so much on the discussion between students. But that is where a lot of our learning was taking place and was intended to take place. And I think that's going to continue into this last week. One of the other things I think that was different was we found some different ways every week of looking at everything. And I'm really thankful to have found and been able to utilize that material from the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston. I think that explained a lot of concepts for us. Looking back, I haven't really dived into last week's discussion to grade them yet, although it was probably not surprising to any of you that you'd have another time to talk about Title IX. But it's such an important point in sports, particularly when we look at college and amateur sport in this country and how it's developed, how the opportunities have changed over the years, and some things that we take for being commonplace in amateur sport now, at least in my career, have gone completely differently than back when I was in college. Women's college sports were almost non-existent when I started back in 1972. A lot of the landscape was different in 1972. I was one of either the first or second year of freshman eligibility when I started playing college soccer. Freshmen just weren't eligible. You came, every college had a freshman team, and during UCLA's great run of all those national championships in basketball, those were done by teams that had players on them for 3 years. And when Lou Alcindor, who later became known as a professional, became known as the great Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, was a freshman, it was said that the only team in the country that could beat the UCLA varsity was the UCLA freshman. So you can see how things have changed over the years, and sport has continued to be a big part of our lives and a big piece of what we do every day. And I hope we've learned a lot about the business of sport. The discussion board in week 6 that I just finished up really looking at critically was the one where we talked about how do we pay athletes and how should we pay athletes and what would you pay a star athlete. And I think that one was one where again we almost floated off, a lot of us, in that, and it's easy to start talking more like a sports fan than a sports business person. But it's so critical. That's the biggest component of your expense in many professional sports. And yet, it's probably the biggest driver of your revenue. Players play games, win fans. Fans spend money, and they spend money in a lot of ways other than going to the stadium. They spend it on parking. They spend it on food. They spend it on accessories. Most of all, they spend it on their subscriptions and cable TV bills. That's where the fans spend the money. Players attract those fans to the seats in the stadium and the seats in the living room. And that's where the money is made. So I think that's really interesting to us, which is why I decided in the end to really, forgive me if you think it's a curveball, but I don't think it is. When you look at the final assignment this week, I've included a couple of articles on the subject in specific, but I think it's something we can talk about, pulling in everything that you know and everything that you've learned throughout your sport economics course and throughout your sport management courses before that. So the question this week comes down to being the Olympic Games as a business venture. Now, right now, the city of Boston won the rights from the U.S. Olympic Committee to bid for the Olympic Games. There's a lot of opposition to that bid in Boston. There's a lot of support in Boston for that bid. And I actually encourage you to just start Googling and looking up articles, because you can find tons of them right now in the Boston newspapers and stories and magazines and everything about the Olympic bid in Boston and whether each party ever was going to agree or not on whether they really want it. But Boston's been commissioned to prepare one, and they'll be bidding on the games. We just saw recently Olympic Games completed in London and in Sochi, Russia. And in Unit 8, I have two articles for you, one about the Olympic Games overall, but it references mainly London, and then the other one about Sochi, as to what were the benefits and what were the drawbacks of having the Olympic Games in your country and in your community. So your assignment is, like I said a few minutes ago, taking into account all the background that you've gained over your time studying sport management, and I want you to prepare a report. And the instructions are pretty detailed, and I give you some questions that you really should think about. But if you are a consultant to a foreign government or the city of Boston or any municipality or country, would you recommend bringing the Olympic Games to that country, and why? What would it do for you? What would it do for your economy? Would it help or would it hurt? Would it be a benefit or would it be a curse? You know, for everybody that claims there's a benefit, we have the example of Athens in 2004 and Montreal in 1976. Those are two places that staged great Olympic Games and seem to have been paying for it forever and ever and ever since the Games ended. At the same time, the City of London says they had a great economic benefit. And look at it just now. Boston won the bid, but 5 U.S. cities competed for the right to do it. So that's your challenge. Look at everything you've learned, everything you can think of, and come up with a recommendation as to whether you think for your chosen target city the Olympic Games is going to be a good thing or not, and can you recommend it to them. Not going to ask you to come up with a detailed plan on how to stage the Olympics. That's something that just takes years to develop. But I want you to summarize what you know, what you can find out, what you feel, what you learn, how this will impact the economy and the business of your area, and what will it do for you. It's a challenging assignment, something we didn't spend time on directly, but I think we spent a lot of time indirectly on all the subjects that will impact your recommendation. So that's what I need you to do. Now, you guys have been a very creative bunch, a very cooperative bunch. You're people who have been able to work with each other and drive some really good discussion on all the topics that we've had. So this time around, we're even going to have a final discussion, of course, about a very hotly contested topic that I think you're going to have some fun with. At the same time, you're working on this recommendation and realizing that you only have a week to work on it. I understand the challenge is put there. So it's a simple summary type recommendation that you're going to be making. If you got any questions, please contact me. Several of you have, and I really, I do my best to get right back to you. And especially given the impact of the end of the semester and what's coming up, and I know you've probably got things going on in other classes, I'll make a special effort to get back to you right away. But I do want to thank you one more time for your effort, the time you've put in, everything you've done. I hope you've gotten a good insight into what goes on in the upper level reaches of the business of sport, the economics of sport, what is going on, why it's going on, why decisions are made, what drives them, and what impact they have on individuals, on franchises, on leagues, on cities, up to having an international and national and international impact. So with all that being said, again, thanks very much. If you have any questions, please contact me, and maybe I'll even get a chance to record one more message during the week. Okay? Thanks, and good night.